All right, so once again, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Serra from the League. And first of all, I'd like to introduce the League President, Mayor Janice Kovach of Clintontown, who will speak to you for a moment and introduce our main speaker. So Mayor Kovach, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Mike. And thank you everyone for being here. It really is, these webinars have been a great opportunity for all of us to get together, to ask questions. I had the distinct pleasure of meeting the Acting Attorney General, Andrew Bruck, 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And yes, my hair was a different color at that time. So October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I go purple every October to raise awareness for domestic violence. So for those who are surprised to see purple, that's why. But it was an absolute pleasure to spend some time with him and with Mike, as well as with Mayor McDonough. I'm beyond excited because not only has he embraced the role of municipalities, but he truly is, he believes in the work that we're doing, and he wants to hear, what we have to say and what's important. So let me do a real quick introduction of his bio. So Andrew Bruck was appointed by Governor Phil Murphy as Acting Attorney General in July of 2021. He joined the office of the Attorney General in January of 2018 and served as Executive Assistant AG and then First Assistant AG. Previously, he spent 5 years as the U.S. Department of Justice, where he served as an Assistant U.S. Attorney in Newark, New Jersey, and held several roles in that office, in the Office of the U.S. Attorney General, Sally Yates, including Senior Counsel and Acting Chief of Staff. Before that, he worked as a litigation associate in the New York office of Davis, Polk, and Wardell, and clerked for Chief Justice Stuart Rabner of the New Jersey Supreme Court. Graduate of Princeton University and Stanford Law School, Bruck is a New Jersey native who currently resides in Trenton with his husband Adam and daughter Libby. He is the first member of the LGBTQ+ community to serve as New Jersey's Chief Law Enforcement Officer, and since assuming office, has prioritized 3 initiatives, including racial justice, gun violence, and policing policy. We also have joining us from the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs, Sean Neefsey, who's the acting director. And he joined the division as deputy director in 2020. Immediately prior, he had practiced law at Squire, Patton, Boggs, where he focused on representing companies in complex civil litigation and government investigations. Earlier in his career, he served as a judicial law clerk to the Honorable Virginia A. Long, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of New Jersey. So Sean and Andrew, thank you both for being here, and I'm going to turn the floor over to both of you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor. I really appreciate the kind introduction of both of us. And I'm glad that you found that meeting several weeks ago as useful for you as it was for me. And for those of you who weren't there, it really was a wonderful opportunity to sit down with Mayor Kovach and the other the other members of the leadership of the League and get a better sense of the issues facing municipalities. And what I took from that meeting is that you all have really difficult jobs. I think working in municipal government is some of the most difficult jobs you can have in public service. Every issue involving a constituent is your issue. Every problem that they have is a problem that you have. You're the ones who are closest to the people who we serve. And you have to tackle it often without the resources and manpower and time that you need in order to do that well. And you do it with great distinction, but it is really challenging. And I happen to have the view that those of us who are lucky enough to be in state government have a responsibility to use the somewhat additional resources that we have to try to make your lives a little bit easier. And if there are ways that we can step in and help support all of you, then we're doing our jobs well. And in the meeting that we had several weeks ago, we discussed how we could do a better job in the AG's office of having an open line of communication to the municipalities, to making sure that you all understood what resources we have available so that we can make your lives a little bit easier. So today's conversation is going to be about the recovery from Tropical Storm Ida and some of the work that's available in our or some of the resources that are available in our Division of Consumer Affairs, which Acting Director Nifsi will talk about in a few minutes. But I hope that this is just the beginning of a longer conversation, because there are so many issues that we all work on and we all deal with, and we might as well deal with them together. And hopefully we can do whatever we can to help you serve your residents and your constituents. So look, Tropical Storm Ida is now, 4 or 5 weeks in the rearview mirror, but the devastation still remains across New Jersey. I mean, it really caught a lot of us off guard and had a tremendous impact across the state. There was the immediate response, which involved a number of agencies across New Jersey. But now that we are a month or two into the recovery effort, we begin to think more about the types of frauds that are perpetrated on the victims of these disaster scams. Whenever a natural disaster strikes, we see the best of New Jersey. We see folks coming to the rescue to help their fellow residents in need. But unfortunately, we often see the worst in our community as well. We see folks who try to prey upon the victims of a disaster, to exploit them, to take advantage of them. And that is especially true in vulnerable communities with older residents, communities of color, communities with limited English proficiency. And we, for better or for worse, unfortunately, have developed a playbook in how to deal with this. We dealt with the scams that arose in the wake of COVID. We dealt with scams and frauds that arose in the wake of Superstorm Sandy, and we have those tools and resources available to help folks across the state. As Acting Director Nifsi will explain, the Office of the Attorney General is structured into a number of different divisions. One of the divisions that we have in our office is the Division of Consumer Affairs. That in turn is sort of subdivided into a couple of different offices. One of those offices is the Office of Consumer Protection, which takes in complaints about frauds and scams, both involving natural disasters and a whole host of other consumer frauds. In addition, the Division of Consumer Affairs also oversees the licensure of a number of different professions. We have 51 different professional boards that operate under the supervision of our Division of Consumer Affairs, which is everything from the Board of Medical Examiners to a board that regulates HVAC repairmen. And so through that professional licensing regime, we have the opportunity to touch a number of different professions and make sure that all the folks who are serving the residents of the state are properly licensed and bonded so that they can, in fact, provide the services that they're promising. And Sean will talk about some of the different work that both the Office of Consumer Protection does and that our Office of Professional Boards undertakes. I think big picture, the important message is we play two roles in the wake of a natural disaster. We do proactive work and we do reactive work. On the proactive side, we try to educate residents so that we can prevent fraud and we can deter fraud and stop it from happening in the first place. But at the same time, we also have a reactive agenda where we receive complaints about misconduct, about potential frauds, we investigate, and then when necessary, we bring actions to hold folks accountable. Ideally, we do so much good work on the proactive side that we're able to prevent this stuff from happening in the first place, but we stand ready to jump in and conduct the investigations that are necessary to hold folks accountable when fraud does happen. Since Tropical Storm Ida hit, we have done a lot of work on the preventative side. I'm pleased to say that we have not received a huge number of complaints so far, but where we have received them, we are conducting investigations, we are digging in, and we're going to hold folks accountable if they broke the law. And I also want to make sure that folks who are on the call today know about what they need to do, both to educate their residents and also to help inform the residents about how they can file complaints if they see misconduct happening in their communities. And that's something that Acting Director Nifsi will talk about. So that's the big picture overview. I'll hand it off to Sean, who really has just been doing an absolutely bang-up job as the acting director of DCA since he came in a few months ago. He really gets it. He really is very consumer-focused. He is very responsive to the complaints that come in from wherever they do across the state. And so I'll hand it over to him. Sean.
Thanks so much, General, and hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm really excited to sort of share what we're focused on at the division, some of our initiatives, specifically some of our IDA work. So I thought I'd do a couple of things, hopefully to be helpful here. First, the general went over some of the background, but I'll give you a little bit of an update on sort of what the division is and where we're going, just for those who are less familiar with us. I'll talk about a lot of our IDO work, and then hopefully I can get into a little bit of our COVID-19 related work and some of our cybersecurity and data privacy work, because that's it's really a hot button issue right now for us. So as the general mentioned, at the division, our primary focus here is protecting the financial well-being of consumers across the state. We do that through a variety of ways. Education, obviously, we're out here doing webinars, we're speaking to the public, we're doing town halls. We do that through regulation, whether that's regulations that the division is implementing, or whether we're working with some of the professional and occupational boards that we staff. We're putting rules in place to make the marketplace a little bit safer. And then we do it through enforcement. Enforcement can be conducted in sort of a variety of ways. Obviously, the Office of Consumer Protection enforces the Consumer Fraud Act, which is one of the strongest consumer protection statutes in the country. So that's sort of our mission. That's the heart of our mission. But we have a lot of subcomponents, and so we house the New Jersey Bureau of Securities, the Office of Weights and Measures, which you want to think about things like making sure the deli scale at your local grocery is up to date and sort of giving you the amount of lunch meat that you've ordered per pound or whatnot. We have the Legalized Games of Chance Control Commission. Think about we're regulating there things like boardwalk games, fantasy sports, all sorts of things there, again, with an eye towards protecting the consumer. We have the Office of Consumer Protection, which I mentioned is our principal law enforcement arm. It's investigating fraud, consumer fraud, enforcing the Consumer Fraud Act. And through the Consumer Fraud Act, we can do a bunch of stuff. We can get monetary penalties, we can get injunctive relief, we can make businesses change their business practices. So we have a lot of sort of tools at our disposal. And then the last sort of component here is we have 51 professional occupational boards. So think about the folks that you interact with on a daily basis: doctors, nurses, accountants, engineers. They're all regulated or supervised by professional boards. And we work closely with those professional boards. So that's the division sort of writ large. We have our hands in a lot of things. And as the general mentioned, we get complaints and issues raised to us from a variety of different places, and we try to be as responsive as possible. So with that, I think I'll pivot a little bit. And, I know everybody's really focused on sort of some of the work we've been doing on IDA, and we're one of just many sort of stakeholders out there, government agencies that's out there trying to help the consumer, get the relief that they need in the wake of the storm. So, I mean, generally, a natural disaster is sort of a perfect landscape for con artists and scammers to come out of the woodwork, and that's particularly true in hurricane situations, because often consumers will find themselves sort of armed with maybe a big insurance check or some additional funds, and they'll be looking to spend it, and they really just want to get back in their house or their apartment, and they're looking to get the first person in the door who maybe can help them fix their situation. And in similar fashions, sometimes you're one of the more fortunate ones after a natural disaster, and you're saying, wow, so many people are harmed. I should be out there donating my money to a charity or doing something else. And unscrupulous charities pop up trying to take sort of hard-earned dollars from consumers, using the natural disaster sort of as an angle to sort of defraud folks. So what are we doing? We're obviously monitoring the complaint intake. We have a lot of resources on our website. We have received over 24 about complaints. And even if we can't do something, we're keen on routing the complaints to the appropriate agency. If it's something that we don't have jurisdiction over, we're making sure they get to the appropriate places so that consumers are getting the sort of resources and help that they need. We also, and I think this is probably particularly relevant for this group, have been sending out investigative staff, 2 or 3 investigators along with our outreach staff, to FEMA's disaster relief centers. So those have been set up around the state. I think there's about 11 of them right now currently up and running. We're going there with sort of paper complaints if people want to file a complaint with us about a business that they think is scamming someone or acting fraudulently. We're also going out there with all sorts of educational resources so that consumers can can sort of know the lay of the land with respect to sort of common bad practices, or even just sort of maybe some good ideas when they're dealing with certain businesses. So, you know, education in a post-disaster environment is really, really important. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those sort of educational pieces in case you want to share any of those with your constituents. But you know, there's a couple of tools, as the general mentioned, that are sort of ripe for use after a natural disaster. I think one is the price gouging statute comes into play after a state of emergency. So the price gouging statute basically prohibits an excessive price increase, which is 10% over the pre-emergency price. The price gouging statute, once it's in effect, goes into effect for 30 days, even post the conclusion of the state of emergency. The only sort of caveat to the price gouging statute is if there is an increase in supply that can be demonstrated, then the 10% has to be ratcheted from the increased supply price. But if you're violating the price gouging statute, the penalties can be pretty serious. So it's $10,000 per violation, and if you're convicted of a second and subsequent violation, it can be $20,000. So when we go after price gouging, we look to get consumers restitution. We look to get businesses to pay penalties so that there's deterrence, and we seek our attorney's fees and costs. So it's not sort of a slap on the wrist penalty. It can be pretty costly, especially if the businesses are, you know, smaller or not sort of well established. So the price gouging statute comes into play in a state of emergency. I think, as I mentioned, home repair is obviously a huge issue after natural disasters. So we try to provide a lot of advice around home repairs. I mean, some of this stuff is common sense, but I think it helps to sort of reiterate it with the constituent base. It's, you know, shop around, get more than one quote, because, you know, sometimes contractor prices can vary pretty wildly. So you want to make sure you're sort of informed where the market's at. I think calling us, we have to register home improvement contractors, calling us saying, hey, is this home improvement contractor registered? If they are, have you guys received any complaints against them? That's a good way to sort of check up on a home improvement contractor. Be wary of red flags. Red flags are things like, oh, I don't enter into written contracts, or you need to give me a lot of cash up front. Things that are sort of off-putting. I think contractors who are positioning themselves in that way, you want to immediately be wary of. I think you know, just sort of common practices about how you're going to pay things. So don't pay the entire amount up front. Even if you have the money in your pocket, say, okay, well, I'll pay you a third up front. I'll pay you a third halfway through a completion, and then I'll give you the final third at the end of the project. The last thing we suggest, I think, is another sort of common sense tip, but it's get the names of everybody involved. So maybe you know the general contractor, but ask who's going to be on your property, get the subs names, get their license plates, get their vehicle numbers, because in the event that something does go sideways or something does go wrong, those sort of facts help us investigate. If you said like, oh, I just called a contractor and he came by and I don't know his name, I don't know what car he was driving, and he said he was going to fix everything and I gave him $10,000, we're in a significantly worse off position when we try to investigate that contractor from there. So those are some of the tips on home improvement disaster-related scams. I think there's a couple other common sense ones that we see. Anybody who's coming door to door claiming they're a utility contractor or some other service professional, just be very careful. Don't let people into your homes. You know, if you have any questions about whether someone is legitimate, just step back, close the door, lock it, call the utility, say, hey, do you have someone in the neighborhood? And, you know, I think taking a patient view and sort of confirming and reconfirming that the information is accurate is the best way to go, I think, in any sort of doubt. And then sort of the last thing I think we've been educating a lot of folks on, and this one is one I mentioned previously, is charities. So the division has a charities registration section. We register a variety of charities. We also enforce, you know, there's a law called the Charities Registration and Investigation Act against charities that are misappropriating funds or otherwise acting badly. So charities pop up after natural disasters, and they often use the natural disaster as sort of a drumbeat in order to get donations. again, I think patience is a great idea. Like like being patient is really helpful in these sort of scenarios. Step back, think, do I know this charity? Have I donated to them before? Is this a new charity? How did I learn about this charity? Was it through a social media post? Do they have a website? Maybe I should reach out to them on their website and say, hey, how do you intend to spend sort of disaster relief funds? Like, are you doing a specific project? Are you going to donate it in a certain way? You know, the well-established charities, they're going to be responsive to your inquiries because they're going to want to get your dollars, and they're going to want you to understand how they're going to spend the money. The less sort of honest broker charities, they're not going to respond to those inquiries. They're just going to demand the money up front, and maybe make some big sort of implausible claims. So you just kind of have to go patiently through. Make sure you're doing your due diligence and your research. And there's some great tools. I think you can go to our website. We have a lot of sort of consumer briefs on how to vet a charity. But you know, some rules of thumb that I often see as very helpful is go to some of the websites out there that vet charities for you, like Charity Navigator or GuideStar. They'll tell you this is a 4-star charity. They'll tell you how they spend their money. They'll tell you if their leadership is getting, that is the staff that's running the charity, if they're getting, you know, an excessive amount of payment or funds. They're really great resources. They help you sort of act in an informed capacity. And then you can feel confident that when you're making that donation, it's going to the right place and it's actually getting to people who need it. The last thing I think I would say with respect to IDA related things, we occasionally see some stuff about flood damaged cars coming back on the market. The best way to sort of guard against this is maybe get a vehicle history from a dealership if you're going to buy a new car closely after a natural disaster. When you're inspecting a new car or a used car, you know, just sort of do your due diligence. Look at the carpet, go in there. Are there any sort of water marks or water stains? Is there any sort of fogging in any of the headlights or in the instrumentation? Look, you know, in the trunk or near the wheel wells, if there's any sort of rust or anything you wouldn't expect to see. And those are good. That's sort of like good evidence that maybe the vehicle was damaged in a flood. I think you'd also want to try to test the lights, any electronic systems, if anything sort of haywire, and you saw any sort of water marking, anything like that, that's another sign that maybe the dealership or is trying to sort of pawn off a potentially flood damaged car. So those are the things we've been seeing most frequently, but you know, we receive a host of complaints, and we're actively investigating them. We can't comment on all of them. Sort of the stuff that's under investigation is not always public information, but please send your constituents to us. We're happy to help. We're eager to help, and that's sort of where we are with IDA related stuff. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Otherwise, I can try to pivot and talk about a little bit of our COVID-19 work and then follow it up with a little bit of data privacy. I think I saw one comment in the chat. I don't know if, no, that was just a general comment. Okay. Does anyone have questions or should I just keep proceeding here?
Actually, Sean, if I may, this
Sure.
is Mike Sarah at the league. This is something, and this kind of goes back. I mentioned this to the acting attorney general when we met. I once roamed your halls.
Okay.
A long time ago. It seems like a galaxy far away. I did initially a summer work and then get hired on an hourly basis while I was at grad school. Did a lot of writing for both the Office of Consumer Protection and the Bureau of Securities.
Sure.
I was kind of split between the offices, and this was before everything went digital. Just before it all went digital. And I know in both those offices, there was a great deal of emphasis and material pushed out regarding scams regarding senior citizens.
Sure.
In particular.
Yeah.
And it's always come up from time to time with mayors as to what they can do, particularly communities with a high senior population.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if there's any local initiatives that can be taken to kind of protect the local citizens, or what to do if a senior comes to you and they've been the victim of a scam. So I think that might be helpful to some of those on the call.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we're obviously very in tune to scams and sort of issues relating to seniors. sort of the way we tackle it is sort of, I think, twofold. First, we're out there doing our education components. I think in almost all situations of scam and fraud, a proactive approach is probably the best approach. Just because if you can stop the fraud or scam or the senior or any consumer from giving personal information out or giving money out or buying some product that's sort of fraudulent, that's the best scenario, stopping it before it happens. So we're out there. I know that I can speak on my own behalf. I've done a number of webinars with AARP. I've done town halls devoted to sort of senior issues. We're seeing a lot of the scams that pop up, specifically focused on the senior community, like grandparent scams are really prevalent, especially in sort of post-disaster and COVID world. So, grandparent scams are like things like someone calls and says, hey, grandma, like, I'm not feeling so well. I actually have COVID. I have some really bad medical bills and I need money immediately. And the grandparent sort of thinks it sounds like their grandchild, but is not really sure. And then ends up either giving personal information or financial information to a scammer. And, next thing there's money being withdrawn from their bank account or something like that. So again, I think the message with all scams really is patience. If you can be patient and sort of say like, you know what, that doesn't sound like my grandson or granddaughter. Let me hang up. Let me call them from a different line and say, hey, are you in a hospital right now with COVID? And do you need cash right now for medical bills? That's a great way to do it. So that's one thing we're doing. We're doing education. The second thing we're doing is enforcement. So a lot of our recent sort of law enforcement actions, litigations under the Consumer Fraud Act, you can get escalated penalties for harms against senior citizens. So where we see a fraud or victims that are senior citizens, we're making sure that we're alleging those things in our complaints and getting those folks the relief that they deserve and asking for escalated penalties against sort of the bad actors. So that's what we're doing with seniors. I don't know if there's anything else that'd be helpful to your constituents that I can sort of touch on, but that's sort of how we focus our reach out to senior citizens. Great. So if there's no other questions, I'll sort of pivot here and I'll start talking about a little bit of our COVID stuff, because I think that could be really helpful too to the broader group here. So obviously we're still in the pandemic. It's been going on for nearly 2 years. But the division has sort of, I think, played a meaningful role in the governor's sort of whole of state response to the COVID pandemic. And we've done that in a couple of different ways. I think first, in connection with our professional and occupational licensure boards, we did a number of sort of emergency licensure programs. So we got the healthcare worker population expanded as quickly as possible. That means by taking things that allowed recent graduates or out-of-state licensees to sort of come into the state on a quick basis, be licensed, be able to practice, sort of swell up to meet the healthcare needs and demand. So that's something we've worked really hard on. The other thing we've been doing is we've been working closely with the boards, the professional occupational boards, on issuing guidance, administrative orders on sort of best safety practices, good protocols for a lot of the healthcare-based office practice licensees, so that they know how to protect their staff and the consumers and patients that are coming in, and even themselves in the wake of the pandemic. So that's sort of really important stuff. We also, on the other side of the house, away from the professional boards and through the Office of Consumer Protection, have been taking a tremendous amount of sort of enforcement activity. So really early on, we were issuing thousands. I think we issued nearly over 2,000 cease and desist letters to businesses that may be suspected of price gouging. We issued over 100 subpoenas, several notices of violation, recouping penalties. We took a lot of sort of enforcement action. And that was for all kinds of sorts of things, like for price gouging. We took a lot of action for price gouging on water, face masks, disinfectants, that sort of thing. But we also sort of policed the false advertising, misinformation space. We took action against a pharmacist who was basically who was holding himself as a doctor, although he was not a doctor, and suggesting vitamins and sort of enzyme supplements as protective cures for COVID-19. So we took administrative action against him. We also went after a company that was trying to sell N95 masks through false and misleading advertising, and we got a fairly substantial penalty against them. We've also sort of gone after a pharmacy who was using antibody tests and saying that they were capable of folks to take it home, even though that was directly contrary to what the manufacturer's instructions on how to use the test was. So we're trying through our enforcement actions, whether it's through price gouging or through sort of inaccurate information or sort of misleading information. We've been trying to police the sort of the marketplace there in the COVID space. So those are some of the broad things in COVID. We're continuing to do things on a daily basis to sort of make sure that we're as responsive as possible to the public and to the healthcare needs of the state. And we're going to continue to do that stuff as we move forward. And then finally, I thought I'd talk about some of our data privacy work. And so data privacy obviously is a pretty big and emerging area, not just for every business, although I think it's particularly important for lots of businesses, but it's also important on the other side, on the consumer side. So we're kind of approaching the data privacy problem from two angles, right? We're doing the education, and again, we've been out there, whether it's speaking at town halls or webinars, and giving tips on identity theft. And there's plenty of great resources on our website about how to protect yourself from identity thefts or cyber criminals. And but we also are doing it on the other side too, right? So we're doing it on the enforcement side. And we do that through sort of a number of different ways. We can use the Consumer Fraud Act as a mechanism. There's also some other statutes that we have at our disposal that can be protective. So there's something called the Identity Theft Protection Act. We call it the ITPA. That basically is a disclosure statute that requires a business that knows it's been subject to a data security breach to alert consumers basically in the most expedient time possible. So that's a little ill-defined, but basically as quickly as possible. But before they do that, they need to notify the New Jersey State Police. So they file a form with the New Jersey State Police about the data breach. Frequently, we will look at those forms in addition to taking in complaints and reading the news and doing all kinds of other investigative techniques. And we will often start investigations depending on sort of the nature of the breach and the facts and the circumstances. But that's sort of one way that we get information. It's a particularly useful statute, I think, in terms of cybersecurity and identity theft. The other statutes that we use in the identity theft and cybersecurity space are HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So that would involve there's some cybersecurity and data breach provisions there, and it involves obviously healthcare information, protected health information. And similarly, there's COPA, which is the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. So if there's cybersecurity or data breach or privacy issues involving children, we're particularly active in that space as well. I think as everybody can sort of see and agree, cybersecurity criminals and hackers, they don't discriminate. They go after small businesses, they go after large businesses, and they're after the same thing. They're after personal information, financial information, and they'll stop at sort of no cost to get some of that information. So on the enforcement side, and I'm pleased to announce that yesterday the general announced that we concluded a very big action against a fertility clinic actually that had a data breach. Somebody accessed their network sort of in an unauthorized way, was able to get approximately 15,000 sort of files of patient files that included things like test results and lab reports, and through that made many consumers sort of vulnerable to identity theft. And they weren't doing basic cybersecurity hygiene things like doing risk assessments and sort of encrypting data and doing other sort of basic common sense things. And because of that, we took action against them, not only under HIPAA because it was protected health information, but also the Consumer Fraud Act. And we not only got them to agree to pay a very significant monetary fine, which was the ultimate sum was $495,000. But I think through all of these cybersecurity and data privacy actions, one of sort of the key ingredients to get the marketplace more protected is through some of the injunctive relief we can get. So these are things that require the business to change practices. And that can be simple things. It can be things like, for instance, in this case against the fertility clinic that we announced yesterday, it's implementing training for their employees. It's hiring a dedicated cybersecurity or data privacy officer. So someone's actually monitoring these things on a daily basis. It's taking sort of technical improvements. So it's implementing some safeguards like encryption, logging and monitoring access controls, password management, that sort of thing. And that's how we're pushing slightly and slowly businesses to change their practices and become more cyber secure and take data privacy more seriously. I'm going to mention one other action, which I think is sort of unique and interesting. Also a New Jersey sort of initiated action. It was against ShopRite and Wakefern, and it had to do with the panels, the electronic panels where you sign your information when you go to the pharmacy and you say, oh yes, I'd like this much, this many pills for my prescription or whatever, and yes, I have this. Here's my health card and all this other stuff. So there was no data breach necessarily, but what this entity failed to do was they failed to properly dispose of these physical units. And because they didn't physically dispose of them in a proper and a safe way, they potentially put thousands of patients and consumers' information at risk for identity theft. So there, again, we got us a fairly significant monetary penalty, but again, I think the more important thing is we got some really important injunctive relief. So we had them have to appoint a data privacy officer. So that's a person who would be focused on data privacy. We had that they also implemented a HIPAA officer, so that they were zeroed in on the requirements of the HIPAA statute, and then providing training for all employees so that they know sort of what are best practices in the cybersecurity space. And through that, again, we're just trying to push businesses in the marketplace to that point where they're taking the right preventative measures and that they have plans in place for it when there is a data breach, because data breaches will be very difficult to prevent, but it's more about making sure you're as protected as you can be on the front end. And then when something bad happens, to have a plan and to notify the right authorities and the consumers as quickly as possible so that they can take protective actions, whether that's through some sort of identity theft monitoring software or something else. But it's really important to push all of the businesses sort of as hard and as fast as we can to implement really good data security and privacy practices. With that, I'm happy to take questions on anything else. I know I kind of didn't take any questions after the COVID-19 portion, but I'm happy to take questions on the cybersecurity aspect of this, or the COVID work that we've been doing, or really anything else that would be helpful to your constituents.
Thank you so much. And I think we may be having a little bit issue getting people to being able to put their questions in chat. So I think Mayor McDonough, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, I don't know, is the acting AG still on? I had a question for the Attorney General. And there he is.
There. Hello.
Hey, General, how you doing? Good to see you again. Just quickly, and we talked about this the other day when we were together. I was just wondering if there's any new guidance that again, the subject we had talked about in helping our local police dealing with, with recreational marijuana, cannabis coming on relatively soon now. Is there any new guidance that from your office how our local police can deal with with issues of pulling which they perceive to be impaired drivers over and finding marijuana or cannabis paraphernalia in the car. Is there something that is more concrete that our local police can use in terms of dealing with a situation like that?
It's a great question and a reasonable one, and something that we talked about when we met a few weeks ago. So the way that you can tell that we don't have anything out yet is that you don't know about it yet, because I can assure you that as soon as we have it ready to go, you will be the first person I call so that you know about it and can disseminate it to your members. So it is absolutely an issue. And so for those of you who haven't had the chance to discuss it with me, I think one of the questions that a lot of people are really confronting in municipalities across New Jersey is how do we implement the new marijuana laws, and in particular, how do we deal with the provisions that affect access to marijuana and also alcohol among minors? And I get it. It is a really difficult and tricky issue. The legislation that was passed is not always a model of clarity. And I think a lot of us are still trying to figure out what's the best way to implement it. I committed on this to the leadership of the league that we would work on guidance that we would make available to the law enforcement officials, who in turn would make it available to municipal leadership, so that folks had some additional guidance on this issue, because I know it's a really tough one. So it's something that we're working on right now. And I can assure you, Mayor, that as soon as we have it, we'll get it out to you, because I know it's something that folks are struggling with. The one thing that gives me a little bit of hope is I know that where this issue was really blowing up, I think, was over the summer down in a lot of shore communities. Now that the weather's getting a little bit cooler, we have fewer folks down the shore. We're seeing fewer cases of those incidents that I think folks were really concerned about in July and August. But this issue has not gone away. And I think it is sort of rearing its head in a whole bunch of different communities across the state. So we recognize it's a priority, and as soon as we have something, we'll get it out to you.
Thank you, General.
No problem.
May I jump in? I thought that perhaps my question might not be appropriate for this forum, but now that the mayor has brought up the issue of cannabis.
All bets are off.
All bets are off. Thank you, General. Appreciate that. So with respect to the directive, the Attorney General's directive, what's it, 2021-1, there's a series of cannabis offenses that are no longer offenses, and they should be dismissed. I do represent many foreign nationals, and I know that you've got a page on immigrants' rights. What I'm finding is that many of these foreign nationals are still being deported for the school zone offense when it's associated with marijuana. So 2C:35-7 when it is associated with marijuana. Now, those can be expunged, but an expungement is worthless for that particular category, foreign nationals. And unfortunately, the immigration courts don't extend comity, COMITY, to that type of expungement. So I am begging that your office perhaps take a second look at that offense, because quite frankly, I do shed a tear when a father of 5 is basically banished to a country that he doesn't know anymore, because he's in a city like Passaic, where no matter where you stand, you are within a school zone. And he had marijuana in his back pocket. So he's being deported as a result of that offense. So anything that I can do, please, I'm at your service.
Thanks for bringing that attention, bring that issue to our attention. And look, this goes to exactly why we want to have this open line of communication, because you all out in the field hear about things that don't always filter their way up to the AG's office. And so this was not something that had been on my radar, but we'll take a look at it. What I would suggest for the specific cases that you're talking about, we'll get you a contact in the AG's office so you can at least share the information about the specific individuals that you're concerned about. And what we'll do is we'll route those to the relevant county prosecutor's offices to at least take a look at those cases and see sort of how the law is right now, and whether any policy revisions are necessary either to address their cases or to address the issue more broadly. But thank you for letting me know about it, and we'll make sure to get you contact information.
Thank you, General. Appreciate that. And those foreign national families, thank you.
Of course.
May I ask a question, Mike? Janice?
Yes,
Well, we're not going to say no now.
It's come to our attention recently that either you or your predecessor, Mr. Attorney General, have mandated 40 hours of police training on subjects such as ICAT, ABLE, and resiliency training in person and off-site, or at least through some means available. And I just wondered whether there was any consideration being given to offset the substantial overtime costs to our various towns for police being trained like that to that extent.
So, that is not something that has come to my attention. It hasn't been raised before this particular issue, or before this particular conversation. What I will say is, yeah, it's a lot of training, and it requires that folks come off the street and spend time in a classroom or an instruction hall, getting a lot of assistance on how they should handle folks who are experiencing mental health crises, folks who are potentially using force against officers, and learning how to de-escalate those situations. And whenever we impose an additional training requirement on law enforcement officials across the state, we think about it real hard and spend a lot of time debating the pros and cons, because we know that it's easy to sort of sign an order here in the AG's office that imposes a training requirement, but it's a lot more difficult to actually implement it, and it takes a lot of time and energy in all these departments across the state. We would not be imposing this level of training on law enforcement officers unless we thought it was incredibly important, and unless we thought that it actually was going to make a difference in all of your communities. The training that we set up, the ICAT training and the ABLE training, are designed to implement and help educate officers on the new use of force policy that Attorney General Graywall issued last December. I believe, Attorney General Graywall believed, that the new use of force policy that we've issued is the most progressive use of force policy in the country. It's good not just for the residents of our community, but it's good for law enforcement, because we think this is going to result in fewer use of force incidents, fewer occasions where situations quickly spiral that can injure both officers and other members of the community. So we impose training requirements. We ask that the agencies do it. Sometimes it requires overtime work. I am hopeful that this training is going to reduce the number of use of force incidents across the state. I think the fewer use of force incidents we have in communities across New Jersey, the more money that municipalities are going to be saving in the long run on settlements and on recoveries and all the other things that arise when there's a serious use of force in a municipality. So I'm happy to look at it further, but it's not something that we've been talking about up till now.
Thank you.
And I'll just kind of add to that. I have a small police department. I absolutely am beyond grateful, as are our officers, for the training. The cost, the initial cost, because over time, for many of us, I have a small budget. I'm a less than $5 million budget. So to have overtime, it's extreme, but we agree and we're grateful that the training is being provided. I have a lot of new young officers. I want them to go out there and to be able to do it the right way the first time, have them learn all of the right pieces of doing the job, because it really has become more of needing to understand more about what's going on in the communities and having that small community. But I do understand, we all struggle with that whole, how do we balance the initial cost? And we know that we spend $1 now, we save $6 down the road. But if you don't have that $1 to spend, what are you trading off? It's similar to a family that's got to make those tough decisions as well. So I think none of us disagree, and we all believe in the training and the importance of it, but we do struggle with that immediate of, how do we pay for something?
And I get that, and I totally understand it, and it's what I was talking about at the beginning, that you all in local government have real challenges because you don't always have the resources to do all the things that you want and all the things that you know your community needs. And if nothing else, what I can commit to you is that as we think about training requirements that we impose, that we be thoughtful and considerate of the resource constraints that you all have, and make sure that we are not imposing unnecessary requirements, and that when we do ask for training, it's because we think it is the right thing to do and we think it will save money in the long run.
No, and we don't disagree, and we do appreciate that. Anyone else? It doesn't look like there's any. All right, I'm going to do one last go round. If anyone's got their, this is your opportunity. We've got captive audiences here. You can ask whatever question you want, as Mayor McDonough has proven.
Oh, the reception is getting really weird. I don't know. I feel like this call's breaking up. It's so strange.
Well, just so you know, the next thing you have to do is now you've got to start singing scenes from Wicked with me, because that's what Commissioner LaCharette does.
I'm just glad you didn't ask me to dye my hair purple.
That'll be next. There are a lot of opportunities to add a little bit of purple to everyone. Ask Mayor Bolwich. He loves color in his hair. You're muted, Chris.
I suggest you agree what last hair. Definitely works. Definitely works. I'm proud of you.
You sound like an alien, Chris.
Wait, it sounds like it's coming from the Death Star.
Yes, it does. I will just kind of throw one last thing out there. And I met with Rabbi David Levy and Dina Denenberg a couple of weeks ago, and they just met today with our county prosecutor, and they're trying to do a lot of work around hate crimes, obviously in bias crimes, and that's definitely become something that's a little bit more that we're all hearing about, and probably not as much as actually is happening out there. So I believe they will be coming to you as well. Just to kind of share some of the resources that they've got and the reports that they've done to show the impact of some of the bias crimes. So I'll just throw that out there.
That'd be great. I'd be happy to sit with them. And we also have started a data collection effort in our office to track bias incidents across the state. So we're happy to share what we've got and
Great.
To work together on developing strategies for dealing with the issue.
I think that would be amazing. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Mike, any last questions from the league? This is our opportunity. What do we need?
Presence at the league conference, but we'll talk about that offline.
Yes.
But with that, I
Awesome.
will do a commercial for those of you on the call. We're 5 weeks out from the league conference. We are in person this year. We announced recently some safety and health measures that are going to be in place. So please, please be aware of that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our numbers are good. We're expecting a great show, and a lot of the issues that you heard about today are on our agenda for the week. So hope to see you all in Atlantic City. Mayor Kovach, any wrapping words or?
No, just again, thank you for joining us, for sharing your insight, both of you. And thank you for everyone who has gotten on to listen. I think we all come away with something each time we have these webinars. And if there's only one good thing that came out of COVID, it's the ability for us to do these webinars and really get more people engaged in the work that needs to be done. And that is being done at the state level. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you in Atlantic City.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.